There we go. I'm trying to get it so it's not.
Okay.
I'm trying to turn
Okay.
to it so I can
Okay.
get out of the. There we go.
Yeah.
There we go. A little better.
So actually, this is one of the events commemorating the launch of our new book, Multiple Hegemonies, 21st Century International Order between Hegemony and Post-Hegemony. And I am the editor, Professor Ki Yang-son, Asiatic Research Institute, Korea University. And joining us from the United States is Professor Christopher Fettweis.
Yep.
He's a professor of political science at
Mhm.
Tulane University in New Orleans. Professor Fettweis, welcome to the webinar.
Well, thank you for having me.
Uh, really, I really enjoyed having you in our book project, and I think you made a great contribution to this
Thank you.
project. First, could you briefly introduce yourself for our audience?
Sure. As you said, I'm Chris Fettweis. I teach international security and grand strategy issues here at Tulane University in New Orleans. I've been writing and thinking about these issues for quite some time, and I am from New Jersey, so if I speak too fast, I apologize.
No
I
problem.
will try to go slowly.
Yeah, no problem. And often, I see the CV of American professors saying they are specializing in grand strategy. What do you mean by grand strategy?
Well, it's a subject that looks at how a country identifies its interests and then goes about pursuing them, the ends that it puts together, and then the ways and means. And what makes it strategy and not just planning is that you have to take into account other countries. As long as if there's either an opponent or a rival or other countries just pursuing their interests next to you,
Mhm.
you have to take into account what they will do and try to think about the moves they will make. So it becomes strategic because you have other countries to deal with. So you can't just set a roadmap and follow the map. You have to adjust along the way and think about what is the right how to achieve your goals in a world of other countries.
I see. So in that sense, you might be very keen to United States
Mhm.
grand strategy, right?
Mhm.
Other than
Yeah,
grand strategy of maybe other countries like China or Russia.
well, I focus mostly on U.S. grand strategy, but actually, my work now is on historical cases of grand strategy. So I've looked at ancient Rome and then the Tang dynasty in China about 1300 years ago, and the Mongols and the British Empire. So cases of great power, grand strategy. What did they do? They do right. What they do wrong.
I see. It sounds like some kind of comparative grand strategy.
Yeah, it kind of is. What of the dominant powers of their time?
Mhm.
How did they put together their grand strategies?
So that means you might be maybe very much interested in the rise and fall of great powers.
Sure,
So
absolutely.
currently, what do you think? In what stage United States is in terms of the rise and fall of great powers? Then?
That's a great question, and as you know, it's very controversial. I don't necessarily think that the United States is declining so much, but I also think the rules are different today. When Rome declined, there were Visigoths that came into Rome and burned it down. If the United States declines compared to, say, China or Europe, uh, nobody will come into Washington, D.C. and burn it to the ground. It's
Mhm,
different. It'll just be a more of a normal country at a normal time.
mhm.
But it still maintains a ridiculously big defense budget. It still has, by most measures, the biggest economy in the world and is most influential on other many different categories of measurable and immeasurable power. So I don't really share these concerns. Some people in my country think, oh, the U.S. is declining, and it's always bad news. That it's gonna be ominous. It's just terrible outcome. I don't think so. I think it's a perception, especially during the Trump era, during
Mhm.
that chaos. People thought, well, the U.S. must be declining, and maybe its influence is somewhat less. But I don't worry about it, and I don't. If China rises, I don't think they're coming over here to do anything bad. So I don't think it's particularly ominous, nor do I think it's necessarily going to happen anytime soon.
Yeah, I think what you have discussed right now is basically boiled down to the concept of multiple hegemonies, actually, which I coined a few years ago. That means China will never going to, for example, New Orleans to burn it down. They are just, you know, inundate American markets with Chinese-made goods and products. So that's what I call the Chinese economic hegemony, whereas the
Yeah.
United States is going to maintain its military strength for the next several decades. You know, if you see the size of accumulated military investment, you know, during the past several decades, and also the current level of military spending, then China will never going to beat United States for the next several decades, right? So that's why, you know, I am envisioning coexistence of different, you know, great powers with different characteristics. So
Right.
I think you fairly understood this concept very well and reflected that in your chapter, right?
I like to think so. And you're essentially talking about, if I have it correct, different categories of power,
That's
and
right.
maybe dominance across different categories, and maybe some categories, like nuclear weapons. There's a sort of a bipolar world we're in, and perhaps that the Chinese could dominate in manufactured goods. Or then again, I'm kind of also more. I have faith in free trade, and I think if China grows, its purchasing power grows. That can be good for the people of the United States, for South Korea, for Japan, because they will be able to buy more of our stuff. So I'm not worried about Chinese goods coming here. It seems to me a good thing, as long as the rules of trade are even. It will help all people. There's the old saying, a rising tide raises all boats. And that, I think that's unlike, medieval days, the mercantilist days of early modern Europe, where if France was growing, it was bad news for England. And if Germany's growing, it's bad news for everybody. Today, if the Chinese are growing, that's good. So I don't worry about because I like you said, they're not coming over here. So I'm not too terribly worried.
But still, as a strategic thinker, in your chapter, you argue that perhaps Chinese economic strength might be translated into eventually its military strength. So,
yeah,
please tell us more about this point.
Well, I think generally speaking, as countries grow, they buy more military hardware too. But the Chinese aren't. And it's true that their military spending is growing. Unlike most countries in the world, especially countries in Europe, and the Russians are slashing their spending. The Chinese are not, but their spending is not growing any faster than their economy. I mean, they could invest more in their defense, but they have enough internal problems. They have enough issues to deal with that they don't. It doesn't seem to me that they are incredibly concerned about their security. They think I'm pretty sure they know that we're not going to be attacking Beijing either. There may come times when the United States with South Korea, Japan clash over minor islets, small islands in the South China Sea or the East China Sea, but these things don't have to end violently. In fact, if nobody wants war, war does not happen. And it's hard to imagine a situation where anyone would want war in the Pacific Rim, in the East Pacific. Everybody will want deals to be made and cooperative outcomes to come. So yeah, China may buy more stuff, and people some people worry about the transition of power between the United States and China. I don't. I think there's plenty of people who want peaceful outcomes. So we will see who prevails.
Actually, I agree with you. But sometimes if I look at the newspapers, United States is actually increasing its presence in South China Sea and East China Sea. China as well. And we see sometimes the military confrontations from the two great powers, taking place in South China Sea. So many people actually are worried about some kind of accidental crashes between the superpowers, right? But still, you play down the possibilities of actual, military conflict between the two countries.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. You can never underestimate human stupidity. And sometimes I don't know why the U.S. Navy insists on just sailing past those islands sometimes, what they call freedom of navigation operations.
That's
Pointless and stupid. So I like to think that we, because you're right, that just gives ground for possible mistakes. But hopefully, even if a mistake occurs, cooler heads can prevail. That because when nobody wants war, as I said before, war rarely happens. It can, because people are idiots sometimes, and goodness knows U.S. leaders are idiots a lot of the time. But hopefully, things can be kept in perspective, and because just the status quo, at least security, can it has inertia too, and hopefully nothing will. If I tell people too, if the world survived the Trump era, if the U.S.-China relationship didn't go too badly during the dumbest presidency in world history, then what is going to shake it? What is going? How can it go bad? If that was a big test, and if international security passed that test, it's going to do pretty well moving forward.
Okay, let's get to the business. And could you briefly summarize your chapter, and also please tell us about your main argument?
Well, I tend to believe that the United States is not necessarily on the decline. That there are many different ways to measure things like polarity and hegemony. That you can have a unipolar world without a hegemon, because a hegemon is a country that actively makes and sustains rules. But I also think that the unipolarity is not what is leading to the overall decline of world violence, which is in my opinion, the biggest trend in world politics that not everybody is aware of. More people are aware of it now. How all kinds of warfare, from civil war, ethnic conflict, interstate war, is on the decline. And some people say, "Oh, that's due to the U.S. actions, to U.S. either unipolarity or hegemony." I'm skeptical. I don't think you need a policeman nowadays around the world to make free trade happen, to make peace break out, to make democracy spread. I think there's general agreement on a lot of countries that free trade is good. Even though there's more, there's nationalists out there, and there are people trying to stop it. And I'm not of the view that the U.S. needs to be the world policeman. And I think everything would be better off. And as you said, as you mentioned, we'd have a less likely, it would be less likely for mistakes and blunder into accidents if the United States would restrain itself more in coming years.
I see. So basically, the reason why we are living in a peaceful world is not because United States is working as a policeman, but perhaps there is spread of democracy, or maybe also international trade as well. So could you tell us why? I mean, we have become more peaceful world, and there is actually no actual possibility of conflict between United States and China.
Well, I think the most important question facing political science today in international relations. Why is that decline in war happening? Because some people think, as you said, maybe spread of democracy. Some people say, it's nuclear weapons, that war is just too unthinkable now. Other people say, as you mentioned, interdependence, maybe the globalized international economic system makes war unprofitable, so nobody would want to do it. Other people, like Steven Pinker, John Mueller, people I sort of admire, they say our ideas have changed about warfare, and none of these are necessarily wrong, but they all add to each other, and just the notion of what we think today as a people, as human beings, believe is worth fighting for is different from what people thought it was worth fighting for 1,000 years ago. I mean, Genghis Khan didn't need an excuse to go rolling into China. He just did it. And today, our visions of what is worth fighting for have changed. Maybe they change back, maybe not. I think it's the most important question, because if we can understand why war is declining, we can get a sense of how long it will last. Is it permanent? Is it just temporary? Because as you know, there are many people say, just wait, just wait. Our species is too stupid to stay peaceful for too long, and war will return. Maybe not. Maybe if we can figure out why it's happening, we can get a sense of how long it will last. So we will see.
Okay, that's all. And thank you very much for joining us. Could you tell us briefly about your next project?
Oh yeah, right now I have a manuscript right now that I mentioned, different cases of grand strategy. So it's at the publishers, and so we'll have to see who, I'm sure they're fighting amongst each other because it's, but let's see where it comes out. But it'll be, what are the implications and lessons for today from historical cases of grand strategy?
I see. Professor Fettweis, thank you very much for joining us. Good luck and best wishes.
No, thank you for including me in your project, and best wishes with it. I hope it goes well. I look forward to seeing what the next steps are.
Okay, thank you very much. Goodbye.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Bye-bye.